Hello everyone, thank you for coming along today. It's really great to be able to share some of Tony Pritchett's work with you. So I'm going to share my screen to begin with. And okay, hopefully you can see this. Right, so here we have Tony Pritchett, animator and programmer, of course, and he was working at a really exciting time in computer and film and animation history. And he was also a really good storyteller, and it's my aim today to share some of his stories with you. But first I just want to begin by very quickly telling you a little bit about how I came to meet him in the first place. And that was here at St Martin's College of Art in London. Now, inside this building was a huge, great big concourse, huge, great big concrete thing, which I've drawn a diagram of in the style of the Flexipede. And so imagine, if you will, screen right, we have a door to a character animation student event that I'd been invited to. And screen left, we have a door to a retrospective. Now, I'm not actually sure whose work was on display that day. I'm apologies to the artist, whoever you are. You see, I never actually got to reach the retrospective because I met someone who was wandering off from it. And that, of course, was Tony Pritchett. And we quickly established that we were both animators. And he asked me if I'd like to watch a film he'd watched on his iPod. And I must add here, of course, he did this in a typically modest Tony Pritchett way, a sort of mixture of enthusiasm and modesty that he quite often had. Anyway, of course, I wanted to watch his film and I pressed play. So, my goodness, there was just so much that I liked about the Flexipede. It was digital, but it was also an analog film. It was a 16mm print with a lovely analog soundtrack, and it was almost sort of cave painting like. I thought, gosh, this looks almost like a sort of great ancestor of one of my silly computer cartoon characters. And then I actually later worked out that the Flexipede arguably is the world's first computer generated cartoon character. And I say arguably because of this film here. Now this, as many of you may know, is Michael Knowles' computer ballet, created 2 years before Flexipede in 1965, over in the States at Bell Labs. And incredible in technical achievement that it is. The thing is I would say personally, this is more motion graphics than character animation. So what do I mean by this? Well, if we look again at the Flexipede, Tony's created a cartoon character that seems sort of sentient. You know, it seems to be alive. Flexipede is reacting to its environment, and marvelous as it is, I'm not sure you can quite say the same thing about the characters in Knowles' computer ballet. And just moving on here. Also on the subject of firsts. I would also argue that in the Flexipede we see the world's first comedy performance in a computer-generated film. It's not a hilarious film. It hasn't got a great big punchline at the end, but it is full of whimsicality. And if I just show you this here, finally, it's a story. It's not a complicated story, but it does have a clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. And I would say, do you know what? In fact, I would argue that this is the world's first computer animated story. And just importantly to add here that Tony didn't seem that fussed himself about claiming such grandiose things. I got the impression he was very proud of his work, but at the same time, he was an incredibly modest man. And goodness knows what he'd think about us talking about him today. I expect he'd be, wanting to butt in and talk about someone else's work, I expect, but who knows? Anyway, just moving on, hang on a sec. And I just want to also add here that Tony seemed, on the subject of comedy, he was quite amused by the lengths that he went to create Flexipede, at least in retrospect anyway. And you know, because on the surface, as Victoria mentioned, it is quite a simple looking cartoon, but David will be delving into the technical depths of all that later on, what Tony actually did have to do in order to achieve his film. So that's the sort of Z depth of the talk, if you will. But back to my XY story for now. And I asked Tony if I could see some more of his work, and luckily for me, he said yes. And so a few weeks later, I was very lucky to get to visit the Tony Pritchett archive. And this was a wonderful world of lesser documented early UK computer animation. And it was all stored in a box room in Tony's house in North London. And one of the boxes that I've selected to show to you today is this one here. And in it is a folder labeled Alien Autodoc. And this project folder refers to some graphics here that Tony created at RAL. And the finished graphic was used in Ridley Scott's Alien, 1979, but the graphics were actually created at RAL between 1977 and 1978. And I'm just going to show you a clip now of them in situ in Alien, 1979.
Disengage.
So shown very quickly there, blink and you'll miss it. They're shown again. They are shown a couple of times in the film. And they're also shown again in Blade Runner in 1982. Because, let's turn this volume down a bit. Ridley Scott liked them so much he used them twice. And here we see them in Blade Runner on a monitor on one of the flying cars. I believe you call these spinners. But these feature a fair bit in the film. So there we go. What I want to do now is do a little experiment. As Victoria said, we're at RAL, so this is the kind of thing we should be doing. I'm going to attempt to overlay the evolution of this graphic from doodle to finished thing over the following description of the archive in the box room. So here we go. Here's my experiment. Hopefully I won't blow you all up. So the Tony Pritchett archive contained computer graphics and related materials dating from around 1963 to 1983. So that's 20 years of evolving graphics and the technology that was used to make them. And some of my friends and colleagues also visited the archive, and they had pretty much the same reaction as me. It was blinking marvellous. And one of the great things about the archive was that Tony created folders for each of his projects that he worked on. And because he worked alone or as part of quite a small, relatively small scale team, these folders would contain an overview of the whole production process. So for example, you know, you'd get budget notes in there, you get correspondence, you get materials relating to design and animation, and of course programming, and it was just marvelous. Just, you know, Tony was taking on all these different roles. He'd even sometimes take on the role of runner, collecting the rushes. Here we got some rushes from Alien. It's all very urgent. And oh, I must show you this actually. This is a little kind of frame of film. Quite often, film in the archive would kind of contain a little tag which would tell you all about the technology that was exported from. And this frame here, if you look sort of bottom left, you see Things. And I just wanted to show this to you today because Things was actually some graphics software created by David Duce and Bob Hopgood. And Things stands for Fortran Interactive Noddy Graphics System, obviously, and of course it does. But enough of this for now. I'm going to undock from these Alien graphics because I want to show you this. And this is a slightly atypical folder in the archive because this predates Tony's interest in computer animation. This is full of work relating to his job as production assistant at the BBC, which began in 1965, but most of the contents from this folder is from 1966. And at the BBC, Tony was working, as I say, as a production assistant on educational programmes for children. And I just want to add a little comment line here to say this was a great interest of Tony's. He was very interested in the use of television for education. And anyway, so this is 1966. Back in 1966, you know, you'd want to be using some graphics in your television programs for kids, but unfortunately there weren't any computers in the graphics department. In fact, there weren't any computers in the entire BBC. So what did the BBC use to create their television graphics? Well, they used cardboard, and this is called a Wurmser, named after its inventor Alfred Wurmser. And these things were filmed live on set, and high-tech ones had butterfly clips. And here we have a great Wurmser. This actually features a picture of Tony, painted bright white and pretending to be a computer. In a series of shows with the most amazing title in the world, Mathematics in Action. And sorry, I've just got to get my script here. And it just so happened that the presenter on this series of programs was Dr. Benedict Nixon. Now, Dr. Nixon wasn't a professional television presenter. He was, in fact, a computer scientist working at the Institute of Computer Science in London. And I'm sure quite a few of you know that this was home to 2 floors worth of Atlas supercomputer, the most powerful, or one of the most powerful computers in the world at that time. And unfortunately, I'll just show you some pictures of Atlas. So there we go. So this computer was over 2 floors, for those of you that don't know. This was kind of the ground floor, and we go into the basement here, where we got even more Atlas. It was a huge, great big thing. So I've got these pictures of Atlas, but I don't have any pictures of Dr. Nixon, unfortunately. Tony and I couldn't find any. Tony said he looked a bit like William Hartnell's Doctor Who. So there we go. There's my placeholder for now. So anyway, Dr. Nixon apparently, in Tony's words, fed Tony articles on computer animation, and in Tony's words, got him really fired up about the idea of the possibility of using computers for animation. This is something that Tony just suddenly thought, you know, this is really interesting. I want to pursue this. And in June 1966, Dr. Nixon wrote to the powers that be at the Institute of Computer Science, and he manages to get Tony some funding and access to the Atlas in order to make instructional films suitable as adjuncts to courses in computer science, and B, to investigate the use of computers for the production of animated film. And pretty much a year later, in July 1967, Tony writes a memo mentioning that A didn't quite come off due to grants cuts, so he's going to go and get on with B and proceed to investigate the use of computers for the production of animated film. So that's the end of my story for now. That's the end of part 1. And I'm just going to stop sharing here, hopefully, if I can find my cursor. Oh dear, where's my cursor gone? Oh, bear with me a minute. Oh, where's my cursor gone? I've got a computer error here, guys. I actually can't see my cursor. Hang on a sec. There we go. Computers, eh? Right, so just to recap, it's July 1967 and Tony is all set to investigate the use of computers for the production of animated film. and he's been chatting to his friend Raz Riddle. And Raz has been reading a story about a mountain walker alone apart from his faithful soliped. And both Raz and Tony liked, as Raz puts it, frivoling about with language, and they come up with the word Flexipede from the word solipede. And so that was the name sorted. And Tony didn't recall creating a storyboard or a script for his film, but he did create one of his project folders. And here we see the Flexipede project folder. And as we look through some of the images in this folder, I just want to remind you that Tony would have been creating his animation without the use of a monitor. And this wasn't some sort of like daredevil, showy, artistic thing that he was doing. Atlas didn't have a monitor. So the only clue he'd had as to whether or not his programming was going okay would have been printouts, listings. These are printouts of the program for those of you that don't know, and also plotter prints, which are effectively pen plotter drawings. Unfortunately, there aren't any pen plotter drawings in the archive, but there is plenty of paper here from the ICS. Of course, he would have been creating his program using punch cards. David's going to be going into much more detail about that later on. But just to say for now that you know, he'd be going up and down stairs at the Institute of Computer Science, debugging his film, writing and rewriting, repunching these cards, throwing away old ones, putting in new ones, trying not to mix the whole lot up. And this was quite a lengthy process by today's standards. And as well as doing a lot of walking, he would have been doing a lot of waiting, because of course he didn't actually operate Atlas himself. He would have handed in his punch cards at reception, and then these would have been put into a pigeonhole, and he would have waited until there was an opportunity for his program to be run. And he told me that quite often this was overnight. So again, you know, I mean, time is really ticking on making this 2-minute cartoon. And so it's not July anymore. It's now the 7th of the 10th, 67. I don't know if you can see that on these listings here. Of course, dates is one of the great thing that these listings are great for. And we see a date here, the 7th of October. And here we have Tony waiting. He's stood here on the gallery, the viewing gallery, I should say, at the Institute of Computer Science. And here he's not waiting for a plotter prints or listing prints this time. This time he's waiting for a 1/2-inch magnetic tape. And while we're waiting for this tape, I just want to tell you that on screen right here is Dick Leatherdale, Computer Conservation Society's Dick Leatherdale. He's only 19 here, and he's on works experience, but there he is. And here he is again. This time he's stood in front of a cheese plant and a clock, and he's illustrating another project that Tony was working on at the Institute at the time, and that was all to do with coalescence and a hidden line problem. And that is the cleverest joke of my entire talk. But don't applaud me, applaud Tony, because he's got his magnetic tape and he's now on to the next stage of his animation project. Now, what I need to tell you about this tape is that it contains some additional subroutines. Now, subroutines, these are basically instructions that are going to allow the Flexipede to walk off the magnetic tape onto 16mm film via a thing called a microfilm recorder. I'm sure many of you in the audience already know exactly what's happening here, but just for some of my friends that I've invited, basically, I'm not going to describe to you what a microfilm recorder is, but I'm going to tell you that David will be doing that later. But he's going to be, basically, Tony needs access to one, let's just put it that way. And unfortunately, the ICS don't have one. Aldermaston do. They have an SC4020, and later they replace that with an SC4060. But you see, the thing is that Tony's not going to get anywhere near those because basically the folks at Aldermaston don't really want to make cartoons. They're too busy making atomic bombs. And that's Bob Hopgood's joke, by the way. If anyone at Aldermaston's watching, blame him. But seriously, Aldermaston there was extreme high security there. Bob told me that he worked there for at least a year and he didn't really get very close to any of the equipment. So Tony was not going to get to make a 2-minute cartoon about a caterpillar on one of those. And he couldn't use the SC4020 at RAL either, because unfortunately, even though Bob had done his 3 years of waiting for it to arrive, at that point in time, when Tony needed it, it wasn't being rented out. But Tony is going to get to use the BL120 right now. This is brilliant that he gets to use this, and quite unlikely because it actually belongs to the UK Atomic Energy Authority's Fusion Research Lab, and but they're going to let him make his cartoon using it. And but the thing is it's in Oxfordshire, so Tony grabs his tape, he gets in his Beetle car, and he drives up to Culham in Oxfordshire to use this BL120. He walks up to another reception. This time I do have a picture of reception. This is not a photo that Tony's taken. It's actually a frame of film, a shot in 1967 of Culham Lab. I'm not sure who this woman is, I'm afraid, but she'd be in the sort of place that Tony's car, half-inch tape would have been handed into. So he does a lot of waiting again. Eventually, he gets back some 16mm film containing the Flexipede animation. Now, remember, as I was saying earlier, that the Atlas didn't have a monitor. So this would have been the first time that Tony was able to see all his frames and them all playing at 24 frames per second. And unsurprisingly, errors were revealed. And Tony told me that he actually drove up to Culham and back several times to debug his film. But debug it he did. And eventually, sometime, exact date unknown, Tony leaves Culham Lab with his half-inch magnetic tape and his 16mm film of the Flexipede. But he's not finished yet. He still has to add a soundtrack and titles. David's going to tell you about the soundtrack. As for the titles, he does those using Letraset. And he does that because he's going to be saving Atlas a lot of drawing time. If you look at the Flexipede titles, they have a kind of quite nice little curve to them. Very nice typeface there. Futura display, if anyone's interested. And it's lovely, but much easier to do using Letraset. Although poor old Tony still has to debug those. Here we have a fly that's landed on the Letraset. But eventually, Tony does manage to finish his film. The date is now 18/12/1967. So that's the 18th of December, 1967. And here is a shot of the master negative, currently in my garage. For those of you who don't know, the master negative is obviously a very precious thing. It's not scratched like the print we saw earlier, because unless you're some sort of crazy artist, you don't put master negatives through a projector. Excuse me. There's no soundtrack in this tin, but there is an undated, there's several actually undated soundtracks in the archive. So let me just have a quick look at my notes. Excuse me a sec. Yes. So what happened next at the Institute? Well, basically, I have a report here written in 1967, which refers to Flexipede. And I'll just read this highlighted section here in case you can't see it so clearly. It became clear that with the computer techniques currently available, the tedious and time-consuming film method, that's relating to animation, has an overwhelming advantage in respect of cost. That was that. And unfortunately, basically what that all meant was that the Institute was no longer going to fund any of Tony's research. Fair enough. At that point in time, computer animation was all a bit of a faff, and the ICS was still paying off their loan for Atlas, and so they couldn't afford to throw money at Tony for such projects. And I asked Tony what what did Benedict think? Benedict thought it was all marvelous, but they parted amicably. They didn't work together again after that. But happily, Tony did go on to have a really enjoyable and very varied 20-year career in the animation industry, which by the end of his career was actually an industry. Of course, there was no industry when he actually started. He worked on a wide variety of projects. And I just want to read a quote to you now, if you'll just excuse me rifling through my notes again. Oh. Hang on a sec. Sorry. I need some sort of placeholder graphic here, don't I? While I find my notes. Sorry about this. I just wanted to find you this quote because it's absolutely lovely. It's by animation legend John Hallis. From a book on computer animation published in 1974. And John Hallis says, Tony, an early pioneer in computer animation, had contributed programming to practically all computer-made films in Britain. And that leads me very nicely on to my next point, which was a problem that Tony and I were having with this documentary of ours about his work. We were trying to get the whole archive into one kind of narrative film, short film box, and things just weren't fitting. And I must tell you that these shots were taken at a film lab in London, nowhere. And I've just got to thank James Holcomb here for allowing us to go on this amazing journey exploring all Tony's work, actually being able to view these film cans. It was absolutely marvellous to be able to go there. So thank you, James. And eventually, after viewing all these cans, Tony and I, we solved our problem. We decided that we weren't going to make a single short film. We were going to make a mixed media project. And this would include photos and listings and correspondence and all sorts of things. And it would also include footage by ourselves and archive footage of the archive. And it would all be kind of compiled together in a form of an ebook, and this was kind of designed to sort of emulate the experience of walking around the archive in no particular order and taking your time where you wanted to take your time. So this was all going swimmingly until, as Victoria mentioned, Tony did pass away rather unexpectedly, and he left us at his humanist funeral to the sound of the TARDIS dematerializing. But happily, thanks to his family, the archive did materialize in my garage. This is obviously, a wonderful thing to have this archive. This is a shot of 176 of the films in there, and so yeah, the archive's got a new home. It's in my house, built in the late 60s, just like the Flexipede. Looks a bit like the Flexipede. That's quite nice, isn't it? And yeah, so that's of course all wonderful. Apart from, there was one very important element to the archive which was missing, and that was Tony. And things just haven't been the same without my tour guide, basically. And to cut a long story short, and to coin a Tony phrase, the project got stuck in the mud. But that that was until four very kind and generous people came along: David Duce, Bob Hobgood, Victoria Marshall, and Dick Leatherdale, good friend of Tony's. And I can't thank these four extremely generous people enough for helping me decipher what's in the archive. And a special thanks to Bob Hopgood for the hours of processing time he's spent on my naive questions and for compiling things into a language that I can understand so that I can then go on and share Tony's work with as wide an audience as possible. So thank you very much for that. And I just want to play you a quick clip now of Tony talking about his animation career. I thought it kind of might be quite fitting for this seminar, and see what you think anyway. There's obviously loads of lovely clips of Tony, but it was difficult to choose one. I hope you enjoy this.
I think my heroes were people who had done something new on their own and made it sort of carved a new path through the world. I've progressed in lots of ways, but it's me, instead of going sort of straight ahead, I've gone all over the place.
So that's Tony on his career, his marvellous career, in my opinion. And finally, I just want to end this with a little story about something that happened at the beginning of this year. I was chatting with Victoria, well, emailing to be precise, and we were discussing the punch cards, the Flexipede punch cards, which are in the archive. And she said, send a few scans. And I did. And then to my delight, I received an email from Bob Hopgood, which reads, send them all. So that's the end of my section. And David will be explaining what happened next.